Hi everyone, today I'm bringing you the second part of painting this illustration, and we will be painting Chase today. He's the biggest in this illustration, and I would say that he was probably one of the more complicated ones, but I will definitely show you all the mistakes I made during painting and how I then corrected them. So this video hopefully will teach you some techniques rather than just show you a step-by-step process of painting only this exact dog. As you can see, I already started with applying Hansa yellow medium to the middle part of his mask. The only thing here is that I'm trying to create a gradient on the top of his head and not just to color everything in like in a coloring book. Now I'm creating two separate bottles of color, which I will be using a lot. The first one is ultramarine blue and the second one is phthalo blue. And I start working on his mask. On the top it is lighter and warmer, hence I use ultramarine, and then it gets much cooler and deeper, so I will be using phthalo. For his muzzle, I'm taking yellow ochre and mixing it with Verona gold ochre. If you don't have this color, that's absolutely fine. You can use just yellow ochre. And I put this color all over, avoiding only the mouth area. And after putting in this color, I noticed that his face also has a lot of blue reflections on it, so I decided to lift some color from the sides and then put a little bit of ultramarine blue there. Even though it is hard to correct mistakes in watercolor, you still can do a lot, so don't feel intimidated if you do something you don't like. In most cases, you can manipulate and correct everything. And now with the same colors, I started working on his costume. The colors I'm using here are the same blues I used on the face. And notice how many times I go over and over a certain area, then I clean off and dry my brush on a paper towel and blend. If you want to learn how to paint these kinds of illustrations, you will definitely need to learn lifting and blending techniques. Here I'm starting to build a dimension in his face. I took the same phthalo blue and I went around his eyes, and then with the same color I went just above his eyebrows, leaving a small gap in between. This gap is what will help us create dimension, so be careful and try not to color everything in completely. After I laid down the color, I blend with a clean and damp brush, and I repeated this process several times to get to the intensity I needed. It's also a nice chance to draw your attention to the brush I'm using. I painted this whole illustration with just two brushes, and mostly I've been using my silver black velvet round brush in the size 6. I can't even put into words how I love these brushes. I have them in several sizes, and in my experience, they are the best in terms of ability to go from absolutely soaking wet to almost completely dry. This characteristic is extremely important in watercolor because when you're coloring in some area, you want your brush to be really wet and not run off pigment fast, so you won't need to go back and take some more pigment and risk creating an uneven wash. And also with a slight pat on the paper towel, it gets almost dry, so you can easily lift or blend colors. And after saying this, I definitely need to add that I'm not sponsored, even though I wouldn't mind at all, as I love these brushes so much. Anyway, I added indigo to my phthalo blue, and now I'm building the intensity even more. And notice how little pigment I take. With a tight illustration like this, less is definitely more. Indigo and phthalo again, and by this time I've built a nice gradient as an underlayer, so I can safely go over with an intense mix like this and it will blend perfectly. Here I'm creating texture on his mask and on his costume with the ultramarine blue. And I'm intensifying his costume with a deeper blue. Now I'm correcting another mistake. In the reference picture, his costume has a lot more texture and detail, but I soon realized that they are not reading well on such a small scale, and it's better to just create symmetry with two blues rather than creating a patchy mask that has no ability to be perceived correctly. I've mixed up Hansa Yellow Medium with a little bit of Imperial Purple, and I use it to create the bottom part of the mask. And here comes the most tricky part of this illustration, building up dimension in his muzzle. I mixed up yellow ochre and burnt umber, and honestly I feel like I've been gradually adding and blending this color over and over like 50 times. So again, please be patient here and don't try to do it in 1 or 2 layers. It won't look believable. The technique here is pretty much the same. I lay down the color, then I clean off my brush and blend the edges. Here I'm taking Verona Gold Ochre. You can substitute it with a diluted yellow ochre, and I put this color almost all over as I felt like my blending started looking really patchy. I purposely leave in all kinds of challenges I was facing during painting and show you how I corrected them. I feel like this is a good opportunity to really master a skill, because when you only watch perfect brush strokes, you won't be able to correctly recognize what you're doing wrong and why your painting looks nothing like the one on the screen. Just know that everyone makes mistakes. Skillful artists just know how to correct them. And I hope that with the help of this video, you will also learn some tricks that would elevate your skill. And here comes another mistake. Notice how the paint spreads and my brush even lifts color instead of laying it down. That happens when you have too much water on your brush. The way you can correct that is immediately tap your brush on a paper towel and then try to spread pigment on the paper in the best way you can. If you still keep lifting more color, you need to load your brush with pure pigment with no water and go with it to the bold spot you created. After you fill in the bold spot, you can wait a little bit for it to sink in and then carefully blend if needed. It's a simple rule you need to remember. You create bold spots and lift color when there is too much water on your brush and not enough pigment, so the only way to correct it is to go in with a pure pigment. For the insides of the ears, I took a little bit of quinacridone rose, and then I take Hansa yellow medium and I finish off the badge of his costume. And here I'm again building dimension in his muzzle. See how I go directly to my pigments rather than my premixed colors on the palette? That's because I don't want to create another bold spot, and I keep fixing the same mistake I did. So I go back and forth with pure pigment and the diluted and premixed colors on my palette. For his tongue, I use the same quinacridone pink I used for the ears, and I'm also using a little bit of alizarin crimson for the back of his tongue. Here I added burnt sienna to my brown mix and I put it all over his irises, and then I add a little bit of burnt umber to the mix and I go over the rim of the iris with it. For his ears, I'm using the same brown mixture I had on my palette, and in the end I'm just lifting a little bit of color from the top sides of his ears. And here comes my favorite part, putting in the darkest darks. As I already told you in the previous video, you should never judge the result of your painting before you put in your darks. Only when you start introducing them, everything comes together and starts looking like it's supposed to. A little bit of fur texture in the ears. And here comes probably the 50th layer of brown on his muzzle. I'm not even kidding, it really felt like that, but we're close to the end, and that is due to the hard work we put in blending earlier. Now I'm just slightly grazing my almost dry brush over the color I put in, and it blends like a dream. Chase's nose also has blue reflections, so I put them in, and after that I color everything with neutral tint. And don't forget to lift a highlight in the nose, it makes all the difference. I also use neutral tint inside of his mouth, and soon you will see me switch into a size 0 brush for more precision. Okay, we're finally getting somewhere. At this point, I'm just checking for areas that need to be adjusted, and I felt like his eyes need a bit more blending, so it would look more like dimension rather than like blue makeup. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm also adding neutral tint to the nose as it dried quite light. I also created these spots with my dark brown mixture with burnt umber. And now we can finally move to his paws. The biggest tip I can give you here is to put masking fluid in the areas of the brightest glow. This will definitely make your job easier, and masking fluid doesn't cost a lot, but it can make all the difference in illustrations like this. Another adjustment here, I thought that the blue I used looked too dark, so I blotted it off with a paper towel and then blended around this area. And you see how I make a mark on the paper, and then if I feel like I have too strong of a color, I immediately rinse off my brush, tap it on a paper towel, and then just spread the color around. And here again I switched to a smaller brush to get his bottoms of the paws right. In the reference picture his paw pads were glowing, so I wanted to recreate this by going darker around them. We're nearly done. Here I'm taking out the masking fluid, and you see that it really helps to create this glowing effect. The only thing that is left now is just soften the edges a little bit with a clean and damp brush, and I also add a little bit of color in the areas that needed some contrast. And that's it. I hope you liked today's video, and I also hope you will come back for other parts of this illustration, as they are not only about this specific illustration, but rather about tips and tricks, and also how to assess different problems you might be facing during painting anything in general. So, see you there!